We've decided to big block swap our Daihatsu Midget, but it turns out you need some very specific parts from Japan to do it. So we jumped on a plane, got an engine from a wrecker, stripped it in the yard, then filled a cardboard box with parts. The box then came back with us in cars, trains, taxis, Shinkansens, and a plane back to our shed. We've only got a few days to have this car started, tuned, and ready to be thrashed in an upcoming Supercheap Auto TV commercial. The pressure's on and we have heaps to do.
Hello.
Made it.
Welcome back to Australia.
It's well travelled, this thing, isn't it?
It is, Martin. I'm excited to actually see if it fits. Nothing leaked, that's good.
I'm so stoked that we got it home. Apparently the rules are no shock absorbers for anyone who's playing at home and wants to do a similar thing and bring some parts home.
Yeah, okay.
Just be wary if anything that's like got pressurised gas or something that would get messed with when the plane changes altitude. That is what you need to be aware of. But for what we're doing, I think we're good.
There it is.
Look at all our bits. This might come in handy, possibly. Not essential though. The thing I'm interested in is this. This is either going to make or break our entire project. Please fit, 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 please fit. That's looking good. That's out of the way. Oh, come on. Dude, this kid's I'm going to be so excited. Dude, it fits! It actually fits. It fits. Look, and see that's the water jacket coolant thing I was telling you about. It's blocked off on the EJ. Dude.
Well done, Martin.
It's gonna work. It's gonna work. That's gonna fit under your seat. Some boost goes in there, hopefully. And some injectors go in there. The only thing that is different, noticeably different, is that you've now got 2 injector ports. So the head is different, but that doesn't ruin us because we just have to block off the factory ones on the EJ head and then use the injectors in here, which we have. So, looking good, people. This is exciting stuff.
Oil.
Water pump. That's the feed line for the turbo, isn't it? Which requires, I think it requires this remote mount for the filter, and that's where it gets its oil pressure from the remote mount. So that'll all go together in one thing. The drain I don't reckon is going to work, but we can remake this really easily and bolt in the side of the sump.
All our bolts. So you may know Tool Pro as a super cheap brand where you can buy all sorts of tools and all sorts of awesome stuff. They do really handy stuff as well, just like box cutters, knives, lights. Pretty much this whole workshop of Super Garage is decked out with Tool Pro and Tool Pro X, which is kind of the more, how would you describe Tool Pro X, Martin? It's kind of like the more advanced tooling.
Yeah.
Anyway, so well worth checking out.
And that stuff comes in more handy than you think too. Like it's one thing to have a socket set or a toolbox, but actually these things you find yourself going for all the time. Just get them all.
Remember never to cut towards yourself or never cut towards your turbocharger. All right.
So let's stick the sump on and then see if that fits, eh?
Look at it.
So little. Oh, there it is. Oh, so we replace all that.
This as
remote.
well, all of this gunk.
But that's where the oil supply comes in, I think. Let's get rid of it. Some more differences and similarities with our E-Series engine. This is the one we pulled off in Japan that like changes the way that the oil filter mounts. And you can see on the side of the EJDE here, it looks like you just screw an oil filter into that. What this does, boom, it goes there or somewhere, and actually adapts that, which is going to be very handy for us because to make any of our turbo stuff work, it uses this kind of convoluted system, but also gets the oil feed from up there and directs it into there, and then importantly, up and into the turbo.
All right, the second moment of truth is seeing if the turbo fits. Now, we're not sure how this will actually fit once it's under the seat of the Midget, but all going well, this here should go on there and there.
Awesome.
There we go, look at that. And then that line, that one,
Yeah, it does the...
should be going from there up to...
somewhere. I don't actually know where that line sits. We might have it backwards, but we've sort of got to just mock it all up, don't we, and figure it out. That's water. That's oil drain. Must go on the top here somewhere. It might actually go sort of
underneath.
Under. Yeah, I reckon. It's funny, we only did it a couple of days ago, but it's still...
Yeah. Well, for it to drain through, maybe it is on that side.
No, I think you're right. I think it goes through there. I think the only midget issue we're going to have is I have a feeling we're going to be limited with clearance there. So what we're probably going to have to do, which is no big deal, is just move our turbo back. So luckily, much like the K-Truck, we have this manifold, which makes it easy because it's essentially like a little log manifold. But I've also got another one of these, which is quite low profile. We just stick an edge off that. So what we have to do, I think, is get this mocked into the car.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's probably, I think we're just going to fast forward and just like fit as much stuff as we can get on. We've proved that it's going to work in theory. We just fast forward it, get as much stuff fitted as we can, and the next big thing we have to do is actually get it on that subframe and get it into the Midget. So I've had a bit of a chance to look at the differences closely between the EFDET, which is the lie flat engine we pulled apart in Japan, and our EJDE, which is what we are attempting to put in the Midget. That's from a Daihatsu Kore, 1 litre. Anyway, you get it. So, biggest difference, I didn't realize at the time, but the head is actually different. Now, we didn't have the weight in the suitcases to bring the head home anyway, nor the time to pull it apart because our flight was leaving really soon. So I probably should have grabbed the head. If you're playing along at home, you want to do this swap, grab the EFDET head. Why? Because the ports are different. So you've got the injector ports on the back here. Hello. You also have injector ports, unfortunately, on the head of the EJDE. Why is that a problem? Because it doesn't match up. So I'm going to be able to make it work by cutting the top off and sort of welding a bit in, which is not ideal, but I don't have much time and it's kind of the only thing that's going to work at this stage. The only other option is getting an EFDET head or a lie flat engine, but the chances of them being one around here is low. And it's also fun just to sort of experiment and try and do it. So I'm going to cut the top off that. You can sort of see what I'm getting at with that. And I will use the original EJDE injectors because I can. Should have the space for it. Hope I have the space for it. And essentially that's what I'm going to have to do. So time to cut and weld and see if I can make this work. One other thing, the engine mount on the intake side fits. The one on the exhaust side does not fit. The EJ does not have the casting in the block. So I have to work that out as well. There it is, still hot, machined flat, as best I can. Gonna plate that and see if I can make it work. Get the idea there, right? Block off that top bit. Away we go. All right, so here's the idea. This is what I'm gonna try and do. All right, so that goes in there, which covers the old ports. It's cut very roughly. Got like a little chamfer in it, so we're just going to weld along there and then clean it all up later.
That's not looking good. That's not looking good. That's not looking good. That's not looking good. There's nothing there.
Hey, ease up.
There's an engine mount there, and this engine mount is a cable tie. What is going on,
I was going to say it's our passenger side engine mount, but actually there's no passenger side.
Yes, they're both driver's side.
Left side. So, okay, so there's a couple of differences that we've noticed with this engine. And yes, we quickly grabbed all those parts from Japan. If we'd been able to grab the whole engine, this might have worked a lot easier. But it's okay, we're going to get it done.
The whole engine wouldn't have fit in a box, though, on the plane.
So there's actually no mounting. If you come down here, you can see why. So on the original Midget engine, you've actually got 3 bolt holes that you can line up the mount onto, and then the exhaust manifold runs in there. On this one, if you look here, those holes aren't there, but what is there is these little casting marks, which means they could have, but they didn't actually attach or cast the plate in that our mount attaches to. It's a bit annoying, but it's not a deal breaker because it does have other similarities like this reference bolt, because the biggest problem you're going to have is knowing where this sits, because if you get this wrong, potentially the whole thing doesn't line up. So what I'm going to do is put the mount back in the original engine, reference it to a point that I know does work. I'm going to weld that on, and then when I pull that mount off, I know exactly where the mount needs to sit. I'm not going to use it as the engine mount necessarily, but it means when we test fit in the car to make sure the thing actually fits at all, it should line up. What I'm worried about is this has a much bigger head and much bigger rocker cover because it's double overhead cam. You can already see it's going to be close. Looking at the car up on the hoist, it looks like it is going to fit, but yeah, it might be a little bit touch and go. So this is the best way you can think of to actually mount it up. This is probably the second biggest challenge after the work that we did last night on the intake manifold, which is now all working, but welding that 20-year-old cast manifold full of fuel and carbon was not easy, but it's done. Dave from Haltech has had a look at this now, sent him some photos, and he reckons it's going to be a winner, and we're going to be able to get it working as long as we can get it in the car.
This is basically the time frame, people. Tomorrow we have to have this finished and actually in the car. The next day it's got to be all wired up and checked to make sure that it actually works. The next day it's going to be on the dyno to make sure it doesn't explode, because this engine hasn't been run for how long? 4 years?
At least.
5 years. We don't even know what condition it's in. The next day, the whole car has to be shipped up to Queensland, where it's going to be appearing on a huge TV advertising campaign for Supercheap Auto, their oils campaign that we're involved with every year. It's not, we have 3 days. We literally have 3 days.
It's a bit crazy.
And we don't know if that's going to work.
We had to do it that way to fit it into Japan to actually make this work, because without those parts we got, wouldn't fit, 100% would not fit. And this is going to be big block and excellent.
We're also starting to question. I can hear the tears hitting the ground. We're also starting to question whether we're going to have time to turbo it before it actually goes on TV. It might just be the big block swap, and we might have to turbo it later. We're going to try, but we just have no time. And building cars for TV is a very, very different situation.
And you've got to fit the turbo there somewhere in that tiny little engine bay. And look, it is possible to turbo it, absolutely no different to what we did with the truck.
But is it possible with the time that we have? That's the thing. It's coming to get picked up in 3 or 4 days.
Exactly. And the alternative is, which is not a bad alternative, you just run a pipe straight off that and it will be so epic and loud and off its face.
Yeah.
And it's going to have nearly double the torque of what it used to.
Yeah, just has to do a skid.
A bit of jack stand action. It looks like it might actually fit. There's clearance. I mean, not a lot of clearance, but there's some clearance. So it's up on the gearbox jack. I'm sort of referencing it off the gearbox mount because that hasn't changed, and that's happy. But the rest still remains to be seen if it's gonna work. It's very close, but very cool. If this works, it's gonna be excellent. It lines up, sort of. We're clearing with the head, which was my biggest concern. It's bloody amazing, actually. Look at it. It's like it's made to be there. It's a bit close here, I don't know if you can see, but that's not going to be a huge drama to overcome. The rest of it looks really good. Clearance to everything. The rear mount is in, which means the tail shaft will not change, which is the biggest blessing of this whole thing. So we're looking good. I'm going to drop the transmission jack. Hope it doesn't fall out. There it goes. It's mounted back in the Midget. That's awesome.
In position is probably more accurate than mounted, because now I have to work out how to stop this engine trying to eject itself out of the car. I'm going to have to make at least 1, probably 2 engine mounts from scratch to connect the engine to the K-frame. I'm also going to have to remove some metal from the car itself and then re-weld it so the head doesn't hit on it. The lie-flat style of engines will bolt straight in because they have the castings in the block for the engine mounts, but ours doesn't. I'm going to make a mount that picks up the big bell housing bolts and connects back to the frame. I'm going to make a template up first in cardboard, then I'll make the mount out of 4mm thick steel. This is proper freestyling. Sometimes you just have to cross your fingers and dive in head first, holding your welder.
Made some good progress with the engine mounting system. I've decided to pick up the big bell housing bolts. It's actually the biggest thing I can find, short of going all the way down to the bottom of the sump here and trying to run like a big mount, which will actually clash with the oil filter. I think this is probably the neatest. I've then got an engine mount off a Ford Courier. That's going to get attached to there, and then I'm going to build it back onto this rail. Having the engine in place is probably the easiest way to do this. But yeah, what I have in skill and what I have in time, this is going to be the solution that I'm going to go with. So it's time to get welding.
Even on your own, I won't let you down, and I hope you know. Even if you fall, when you're all alone, I will pick you up. and carry you home. Anywhere you go, even on your own, I won't let you down and I hope you know. Even if you fall when you're all alone, I will pick you up and carry you home.
Alright, so the engine is now mounted. It's a bit of a hassle to get it to sit where I want it to sit, so I've had to make a mount off the gearbox here, which is pretty solid. I've still got one side of that mount to do. I've also added one up the front here as well. I was hoping to not have to, but it's just not going to hold. It flexes too much in that direction and it really does need to be solid. So now the motor can move a fair bit under power, but it won't rotate, which is what the engine wants to do in the sort of opposite direction to the way the engine rotates. Got room for the exhaust. The great thing about this setup is now I just remove the back gearbox mount and then I drop this subframe back down on the gearbox jack, and then I get access to everything, so I can finish these mounts, clean them up, weld them, paint them, do all the stuff, but I needed to get it actually locked into position before I could do that. So this is going to come down, then a whole bunch more welding. Well, I didn't know if it was even going to fit, and it seems like it's going to. It was a lot of extra effort to make those engine mounts, but I'm really happy with how it's sitting on the K-frame now. It's really solid. They've all been welded up. Now I've just got to paint them and paint the K-frame so nothing rusts. Now it's just down to actually the normal kind of servicing stuff that you do to an engine if you're putting it in the car. Now these EJs are notorious for getting sort of gunky and not very nice in there. They are notorious for blowing smoke, for doing rings. There's all those sort of things. I did drive the car that this motor came out of a couple of years ago and it was fine, so fingers crossed it still is. But if not, I'm still going to replace a few things like do sump gasket, rocker cover gasket, clean up all the mating surfaces, make sure it's as nice as possible, replace the belt, fresh oil, fresh gearbox oil, and then all that's left to do is get it in the car and then start wiring and plumbing it up.
So why do people love big block swaps so much? Well, we are huge fans of forced induction, just like any other living, breathing human being should be. But squeezing an enormous engine into a small car has been responsible for some awesome experiences. This weird Daihatsu Odyssey that we're on right now isn't all that different to the V8 big block swaps of yesteryear. You get the biggest engine that you can physically fit in the engine bay and then make everything else work, and hopefully even keep it road legal.
It turns out the dipstick is in a different location to suit the lie flat sump, so I'm going to cut a thread and install a stud with some sealant to block off the old hole. Then the sump can go on, as can the rocker cover from the Japanese motor that we stripped in Japan.
Time to put the injectors in. This is the set of injectors that was in my Lavorg in the EJ25. It's a slight upgrade, well slight, it's a huge upgrade to the stock ones, and actually the injector rails that I've got is the injectors from the EFDET, which is actually a 600cc engine, so these are 2.5 litre injectors, but because we're using an aftermarket ECU using Haltech, we're able to scale these to do exactly what we want, set the appropriate fuel pressure and go. Luckily they're the same 3/4 length injector, so these will bolt straight in like this. Because we have modified the intake manifold, it means no gasket. So, gotta make one. This is gasket paper. I haven't really had to do this much because this is more of like an old school thing, but you cannot actually get a gasket to suit this in Australia, and even if you could, it would be missing half the bolts at the top. So this is sort of where the Frankenstein engine really comes into it. But you can just cut this paper out, and because it's just an intake manifold, no boost, unfortunately at this stage, there won't be much air trying to escape out of that. So that pretty much is how it works. Cut it to size to fit exactly, treat that a little bit, clean everything up, and then I can put that onto the engine.
If this looks a bit dodgy, that's because it is, but as long as the air stays inside the engine and the coolant stays out of the part meant for the air, this should work just fine. But this gasket holding will make or break the swap.
Pretty happy with that. Refine those edges just a little bit, and then that will go Godonk onto the head.
Martin, who would have thought that your years and years of very useful Daihatsu encyclopedic knowledge
Give it a pump,
would have
mate.
eventuated to this?
Well, this is one of the most extreme Daihatsu things I think we've ever done.
It's intercontinental, Martin.
It is.
It's Japan, it's Australia. Are we? No, we're
We're
going
up. And so now I left the gaskets to dry overnight because they needed to set properly. And now it's the moment of truth. This thing either fits with all its fuel rail and its rocker cover and all its stuff on.
Dude, it's gonna fit.
Or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we're absolutely...
No, dude, we're going to be fine. We're going to be great.
So if we line up this back mount first, so keep pumping, keep pumping.
Oh, there.
Yeah, pump him up, pump up the jam.
Dude, I can't believe that we were just in Japan and now we're
Yeah, stop
here.
there.
And now this is actually going in.
Well, if it fits. I mean, but look, if it does, I'm going to be so excited, I'm not going to lie to you. All right, so now that's set, so that should
Can
get
I
us in the
send
right
the
spot.
rest now?
Go up a little bit more, it'll start to go into place. Oh, dude, it's looking
I
good.
need a couple of, where are they?
The big washers, there's
Here
two
we
next
go.
to your head, but you also need these ones. 2 of these for the top, on top of that thingy. And then that one goes in from underneath.
That one, we've only got one, Martin. I've only got one
You
bolt.
should have another bolt. Here's
don't
another bolt.
have another one.
Here you go.
Oh, thank you, mate.
One I prepared earlier.
All right,
So, dude, if this goes in, we're good. There's still work to do, obviously, but we are getting very close.
dude, that's going in.
Is it? I think I need one more pump. If that fits, I mean, it should fit because I made the engine mounts on the car, but if that fits, we just need to drop it down and look at the top and make sure it's not clashing with anything.
Yeah.
I lost my bolt though. I think my two are good. Looks good from down here. We just have to check from above that it's not clashing with anything. We can take this strap off.
Dude, that's fantastic.
Oh, I'm so excited if this works. I'm just so pumped. Suspended in the Midget under its own power. After a whole lot of customization, the Midget engine is in. I'm absolutely frothing because it's a big block, double overhead cam, modern Midget.
1 litre big block, people. Has anybody ever considered a 1 litre to be a big block before, Martin?
We have.
Yeah, we have.
I mean, if you've got a motorbike, it would be big.
That's true. This is a car. I mean, it's a truck. Anyway, from Australia to Japan and back, Martin's epic Daihatsu skills, a little bit of fangdanglery, and we're there. We have
We're there. We're there.
one more day where it has to be wired up, working, and on the dyno, and then it's getting shipped 1,000 Ks
Fuel.
to appear in the new Supercheap Auto TV commercial. So
Fuel,
there's a lot
coolant,
to do still.
wiring, exhaust. 4 things in one day.
Yeah, it's going
We
to be
literally
epic.
have a day.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we will see you on the next episode of Mighty Car Mods. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can go to mightycarmods.com. We've got lots of merch there. Thanks to Supercheap Auto for having us involved in the build, and of course, for being a long-term sponsor of the show and supporting us over many, many years. We will see you next episode for more Midget action.
We're going to start it, aren't we? We're going to get
Next
started.
This is unreal, man. Good job.